He didn't want much, he just wanted him to be there, even if it was for a few minutes. However, that afternoon something unexpected happened, something that would change everyone's routine in the family. It was a chaotic afternoon in Monterey, with heavy traffic and the sun still punishing the city. Mary, as usual, was playing in the garden of the mansion, while the nanny watched from a distance. The girl, distracted by her games, walked away more and more until she unknowingly came out through the open doors of one of the gardeners. The nanny, busy with the phone, did not notice the little figure moving away. Mary, fascinated by people and cars from outside, began to walk on the sidewalk, increasingly far from the security of the house. Her curious gaze captured the shelters of the stores and the vivid colors of the advertising fences. The city, with all its agitation, seemed like a great adventure for such a young girl. Suddenly, a dog ran down the street, and Mary, finding him adorable, decided to follow him. Without thinking twice, the animal ran fast, dodging pedestrians, and Mary, without noticing the danger, crossed the street in his direction. He didn't notice the car coming at high speed. The driver tried to brake, but the vehicle was getting too close. The shrill sound of the brakes resounded in the air, and everything seemed to happen in slow motion. It was at that moment that Luke, who was returning home the next day selling candies, saw the scene. Without thinking, he grabbed the girl by the arm and threw her towards the sidewalk. Just a second before the car passed by, rubbing them. The noise of the wheels burning the asphalt was followed by the stunned silence of the pedestrians around, who witnessed the scene with their eyes wide open. He looked at Luke with tears in his eyes. You saved me," she said with a trembling voice. Luke, still recovering his breath, replied, "Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" Mary moved her head, trying to contain her tears. "No, I'm fine. I'm just scared. Thank you very much." The people who passed began to crowd around her, murmuring about what had happened. An older lady approached and put her hand on Luke's shoulder. "You were very brave, boy. You saved this girl's life." Luke only sighed, still trying to process everything. He looked at Mary, who seemed lost and confused. "Do you know where you live? Are you alone?" Before Mary could answer, the girl, pale and desperate, appeared, running and pushing people to make way. Mary, "Thank God. Are you okay?" She knelt beside the girl, hugging her tightly. She was so worried. "How did you get out like this?" Mary looked at Luke, still a little scared but relieved to be safe. "This boy saved me, Evelyn. He threw me to the sidewalk." The nanny, realizing what had happened, looked at Luke with gratitude. "Thank you, boy. I don't know how to thank you. You were an angel." Luke, modest, just moved his head. "I just did what anyone would do." She was in danger. Before the conversation could continue, the sound of skidding tires announced the arrival of a luxurious car that stopped abruptly next to her. The door opened, and John got off in a hurry with a face full of concern. "My daughter." He ran to her, kneeling next to the girl and wrapping her in a tight hug. "Daddy," Mary exclaimed, finally feeling safe in her father's arms. I was afraid." JN held her tightly, breathing relieved to see her safe and sound. Then he looked at Luke, realizing the boy for the first time. "Was it you who saved my daughter?" Luke answered shyly. "She was crossing the street, and I just threw her to the sidewalk." John looked at the boy with a deep expression of gratitude. "I have no words to thank you. You saved the most precious thing in my life." He took his hand out of his pocket and pulled out a bundle of bills, extending it to Luke. "Please accept this. It's the least I can do." Luke looked at the money but moved his head. "I can't accept it, sir. I just did what anyone should do." JN was surprised. "But it's a lot of money. This can change your life." Luke smiled slightly. "Money is not everything, sir. I just wanted to help." Luke's answer left Mr. Kennedy intrigued. He remained silent for a few seconds, watching the boy more closely. Something in him aroused a deep curiosity in the businessman, something that made him want to know more about this boy who seemed so different from the other people he knew. "So what do you want, boy? How can I repay what you did for my daughter?" asked John, genuinely interested. Luke looked at Mary, then at John, and finally said, "I just wanted you to come with me. There is someone I would like you to meet." John, still intrigued by Luke's unusual request, agreed to accompany him. "All right, boy. Let's see what is so important to you," he said, trying to hide his growing curiosity. Mary, holding her father's hand firmly, also wanted to go with them. The babysitter doubted, but JN made a gesture indicating that it was not necessary to worry. The trio followed Luke down the streets of Monterey. The contrast between the opulence of Kennedy's luxury car and the humble path they were taking was evident as they moved away from the busiest areas and entered a less favored neighborhood. The air seemed to weigh with a feeling of silent despair. After a few minutes walking in silence, Luke finally stopped in front of a small house of shabby walls and a worn roof. "It's here," he said, opening the door that was creaking when pushed. The garden, if you could call it that, was covered in mold, and an old rusty bicycle was leaning against the wall. John looked around, feeling an uncomfortable feeling he was not used to. He had always known that there was poverty in the city, but being in front of it so close was a different experience. Mary, on the other hand, seemed confused, pressing her father's hand harder. Luke took them to the door and came in first, he said softly, but he was in a certain hurry. Kennedy and Mary stood at the door, doubtful, until Luke called them in. "Please come in." I want you to meet my mother. The house was simple, with old furniture and few decorative objects. In the corner of the room, there was Anne's improvised bed, where a woman of a fragile appearance was lying down. Her pale and tired face clearly showed the signs of her long battle against the disease. Did you bring guests? Asked the woman, lifting herself slightly to look better. His voice was soft, almost like a whisper. Yes, Mom, this is John and his daughter Mary. They wanted to meet you, Luke replied with a shy smile. John took a step forward, feeling a knot form in his throat. He extended his hand to the woman, who looked at him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Nice to meet you, Ma. I'm Kennedy, he said, without the formality that he usually carried in his presentations. The pleasure is mine. I don't know what my son told you, but I hope it didn't bother you, said the woman with a weak smile, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Actually, I was impressed, replied Kennedy sincerely. His son is extraordinary. Mary, who had been silent until then, came to the bed and smiled at the woman. Are you Luke's mother? He saved me today. He is a hero, said, with the innocence of a girl who sees things in a simple and direct way. Luke's mother smiled, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. Yes, Mary, you have always been my hero since you were born. The comment made Mr. Kennedy feel a piercing pain in his chest. Watching that scene, he realized how he had distanced himself from his own daughter, believing that expensive gifts and a comfortable life would replace what really mattered. That little house, so different from his, seemed to have more human warmth than his mansion ever had. Luke, perceiving Kennedy's silence, spoke in a softer tone. Sir, I just wanted you to see how we live. My mother has been sick for a long time, and I do what I can to take care of her. Kennedy remained silent for a long time, looking at Luke and then at his mother. The simplicity of honesty of that moment deeply impacted him. He knew that money was not a problem for him, but what he had ahead of him was more than a matter of finances. It was proof that even in the midst of extreme poverty, the love and care between mother and son were unbreakable. Kennedy was faced with a choice: to continue living in his isolated world of wealth, or to allow this experience to transform his life. Luke, your mother is very lucky to have a son like you, Kennedy finally said. I'm going to help you. I won't just give you money. I want to make sure that your mother gets the treatment she needs, and that you have the opportunity to study to build a future far from the streets. Luke's eyes were filled with tears, but he controlled himself, assenting. Thank you, sir. I don't know how to thank you. Kennedy crouched next to Luke, putting his hand on his shoulder. You don't have to thank Luke. Sometimes you need someone like you to remind us what really matters. Mary, smiling when she saw the scene, took Luke's hand and said, we can play together when my babysitter is not looking. Everyone laughed, breaking the tense atmosphere. That moment was the beginning of a profound change in Kennedy's life and his family. With Luke's mother's treatment well underway and his new routine at school, the boy's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. In the morning, he no longer needed to run to the traffic lights offering candies to ensure the sustenance of the day. Now he put on the school uniform, organized his backpack, and went to class with a mixture of enthusiasm and nervousness. Opportunity to build a future at school. He soon stood out for his determination and curiosity. Each new lesson was absorbed with avidity. For Luke, learning was more than just following the curriculum. It was a gateway to a world that he had only dreamed of reaching. His teachers quickly noticed the brightness in his eyes and the commitment he put into each task. Luke, who used to only worry about surviving, now began to dream of what he could do during break. Mary was always close. She took him to meet new friends, and soon Luke felt part of that group. They played, talked, and sometimes Mary insisted on helping him with the homework. You're going to be the best student at school, Luke, he said with conviction, and Luke only smiled, grateful for the friendship that had arisen between them. One afternoon after school, Mary invited him to visit his house. Luke doubted at first, aware of the place. Everything there seemed to have been made to show the success and wealth of JN. They walked through the wide corridors. But sometimes it seems very big and empty. Luke looked at her, surprised. Empty? How? So you have everything here? Mary shrugged. I have everything, but I don't always have my father close. Now he's trying to spend more time with me, and I like that. But before, I felt alone. Even with all these rooms and beautiful things, Mary's words resonated in Luke's mind. He knew what it was like to miss someone, although in his case it was different. Despite the difficulties, he had always had the love and constant presence of his mother. That was a reminder that material wealth did not replace emotional connections. As they talked, JN entered the room. He stopped to see the two of them together and smiled. I see you are getting along very well, he said, sitting next to him. Yes, Dad, Luke is my best friend now, Mary answered proudly. Kennedy looked at Luke and asked, and how are things going, Luke? How are you adapting to school? I'm fine, sir. Class is difficult, but I'm enjoying them a lot. It's an opportunity I never thought I would have, Luke answered sincerely. I'm glad to hear that, said Kennedy with a serious but welcoming expression. You deserve every opportunity you are receiving, Luke, and remember, if you need anything, I'm here to help. The days went on, and Luke's routine was stabilizing. He visited his mother in the hospital whenever he could, and on each visit he felt more relieved to see her recovering. She was stronger, and the smile on her Face was a constant reminder that things were finally changing for the better. One afternoon on his way back from school, Luke found John in the hospital, sitting next to his mother's bed. They talked in a relaxed manner like old friends. Kennedy looked at Luke when he entered, pointing to him, so that he would join them. "Luke, I was telling your mother how you are doing at school," Kennedy said, with a smile. "Yes, Mom, I'm learning a lot, and I'm even thinking about what I want to be when I grow up," Luke answered, sitting next to him. "And what do you want to be, my son?" asked Luke's mother, her voice still soft but full of curiosity. Luke looked at them, feeling the weight of the question. "I want to be someone who helps people, someone who makes a difference like you did for us, Mr. Kennedy." Kennedy smiled, moved by Luke's words. "You are already making a difference, Luke. Sometimes it is not what we do with money or power that matters, but how we touch the lives of others, and you have taught me that more than anyone else." Luke's mother smiled proudly at her son. "You have always been special, Luke, and I know you will achieve everything you dream of." As the weeks went by, Luke's life continued to improve. His mother, getting stronger and stronger, could already get up and walk through the hospital room of the hospital. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, and the hope that she could go home soon grew every day. Meanwhile, Luke stood out at school. His teachers frequently praised his dedication and effort, and he began to be recognized by his classmates as someone who overcame challenges with inspiring courage. Mary, always by his side, helped him with schoolwork and encouraged him to participate in extracurricular activities. Together, they formed a friendship that transcended the differences of their origins. One morning, while preparing for school, Luke received news that moved him. His mother was finally ready to leave the hospital. It was the moment he had been waiting for so long. When he arrived at the hospital to pick her up, he found John already present, helping with the last preparations for the high. "Dr. Luke, today is a great day," said Kennedy with a warm smile. "Your mother is much better, and that is thanks to you too." Luke, with his eyes shining with joy, hugged his mother carefully. "I'm so happy you're better, Mom. Now, let's go home and make everything go back to the way it was." His mother, with tears in her eyes, caressed Luke's face. "My son, nothing will be the way it was. It will be better. We have gone through so many things, and now we have a new opportunity, a new life." John watched the scene in silence, feeling a deep satisfaction when he saw his happiness. For him, that trip had also been a transformation. Humanity. That same day, they returned to Luke's house, but this time things were different. JN had made some improvements to the house, making it more comfortable and suitable for Luke's mother's recovery. Upon entering, Luke was surprised to see the changes. The walls were painted, and there was even new furniture. "Mom," Luke exclaimed. Luke, amazed. "Everything is so beautiful." His mother smiled, still a little excited. "It's really amazing." "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Kennedy." Kennedy, who was next to him, moved his head. "You don't need to thank me. I did what was right, and you deserve all this and more. Now, what matters is that you are well and happy." The following day, John continued to visit Luke's family regularly. He felt part of their lives in a way he had never imagined. Whenever he could, he also brought Mary, who loved to spend time with Luke. They both played in the courtyard, laughed, and shared stories. For Mary, being next to Luke was a new and enriching experience, a true friendship that was not based on wealth or status. One afternoon, while Luke and Mary were playing ball in the courtyard, John and Luke's mother were watching from afar, sitting in a chair under the shade of a tree. Kennedy said, "Luke's mother, I never imagined that life would bring us here. A few months ago, I thought everything was lost, and now to see my son so happy, it's like a dream." Kennedy felt thoughtful. Life has a curious way of surprising us. Sometimes what we think is the end is just the beginning of something much bigger. She looked at Kennedy, her eyes full of gratitude. "You have changed our lives, Kennedy, and I see that your life has also changed. I am not the only one who says this, but thank you, really." Kennedy smiled, a sincere smile, something he rarely did before meeting Luke. "I think we all learned something from this experience, me more than anyone. You showed me what really matters in life, and that's why I'm the one who should thank you." As the sun began to set, bathing the courtyard with a soft and golden light, Kennedy felt an inner peace that he had not experienced in a long time. He was in a simple place, surrounded by people who until recently were strange to him, but now they were more than that. They were the living proof that the true value of life is not in possessions, but in the connections we make and the people we touch. Mary ran to them. "Dad, you have to see how good Luke is at football. He's going to be a great player, I'm sure." Kennedy laughed and looked at Luke. "Well, if you want to follow that path, I'll be here to support you." Luke smiled, still shy with compliments, but deeply happy. "Thank you, sir. I still don't know what I'm going to do in the future, but now I feel I can be anything, and you can," said Kennedy, convinced with determination and heart. "You can achieve whatever you want." That night, when everyone said goodbye and John and Mary returned home, Kennedy lay in bed with a feeling of fullness. He knew that despite all the difficulties he had faced throughout his life, he had finally found a greater purpose. He was eager for the future, a future where he was not alone but connected to something greater than himself. And above all, he was determined to be the father and the man he always wanted to be. As he slept, one last image came to mind: Luke's smile, and the certainty that he had made the right decision both for the boy's life And for his own the next few days, Luke's new routine and his mother's were adjusting to the quiet rhythm of the change that had occurred in his life. Luke continued to attend school, dedicating himself to studies with a renewed determination, while his mother, still recovering, gradually resumed her activities, taking care of small details of the house and beginning to plan the future with hope. Mr. Kennedy, on the other hand, felt incredibly united to Luke and his mother. His visits to the boys' house became more frequent, and he discovered that he liked to spend time in that simple and cozy environment. For him, those visits were like a breath of fresh air, a necessary pause in the midst of the whirlwind of commitments that his business life demanded. One afternoon after school, Luke was sitting on the terrace reading one of the books he had taken in the school library. The sun was still shining brightly, but a soft breeze made the "You're a great player, so I thought a new ball would be a good idea. What do you think?" Luke held the ball carefully, as if it were the most precious object in the world. "It's amazing. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I've never had such a good ball." Mary, full of energy, was ready to play. "Come on, Luke. I want to see your skills in the field." The three headed to a small field next to the house, where they started to play. Mary's laughter and Luke's agile movements turned the afternoon into a moment of pure joy. John, who rarely participated in physical activities, joined them, feeling lighter and more relaxed than he had felt in years. They ran, kicked the ball, fell, and laughed together like a real family. Mary, always curious, looked at her father and asked, "Dad, did you play soccer when you were a kid?" Kennedy laughed, wiping the sweat off his forehead. "I played a little, Mary, but when I started working very young, I had to put those things aside. Time was short, and the responsibilities were many." Luke, still holding the ball, looked at Kennedy and asked, "And did you like to play? It seemed like you were having a lot of fun." Now Kennedy smiled at both of them. "Yes, I liked it. I think for a moment I forgot how good it is to just have fun without thinking about problems or business. You helped me remember that today." Mary crouched next to her father, satisfied to see him so relaxed. "I love it when we're like this, Dad, just us in a hurry, without commitments." Kennedy looked at his daughter with affection, feeling a pinch of guilt for taking so long to realize the importance of those moments. "I also, Mary, and I promise we'll have many more days like this." Luke, still surprised by everything that was happening, felt a heat in his chest. He never imagined that his life would change so much in such a short time. Mr. Kennedy moved his head, smiling. "You don't have to thank me, Luke. Believe me, I've learned a lot from you too. And seeing that you're happy that your mother is recovering, that's the best reward I could get." The afternoon was spreading, and soon the sky began to turn dark with the colors of sunset. They returned to the house, where Luke's mother had already finished dinner. They sat at the table together, sharing a simple meal, but full of meaning. For John, that moment was more valuable than any business dinner at an expensive restaurant. He was surrounded by people who in a short time had become an important part of his life. While they ate, they talked about plans for the future. Marilla spoke cheerfully about school and its activities, while Luke told about his new discoveries in the studies. "John Kennedy, I know I've said this many times, but you've really changed our lives, and I'm not just talking about the improvements. Your presence, your love, is something I'll never forget." Kennedy took his hands with a sincere look. "You also changed my life, and that is why I will always be here for you, as a friend, and as part of this family." She smiled, excited. "We are lucky to have you in our lives, Kennedy. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." After the farewells, Kennedy and Mary returned home, but this time the journey was different. It was not just a return to the mansion, it was the return to a home that now was fuller of love and understanding. Kennedy felt that finally he had found the balance between his professional and personal life. He closed his eyes with a smile on his face, knowing that regardless of what the future brought, he was on the right path. And while the dream enveloped him, he was sure that the best was yet to come. As the days went by, the routine was established in a way that seemed natural and comfortable. Luke continued to stand out at school, increasingly confident in his skills. Mary, always by his side, he encouraged him in every new achievement, and the two became inseparable. Their friendship was a constant source of mutual joy and support. Mr. Kennedy, on the other hand, was increasingly immersed in a life that now included not only business but also precious moments with his daughter and Luke's family. One afternoon, after school, Luke and Mary suggested with enthusiasm. Luke smiled, remembering the small park in his old neighborhood. "Sure, Mary, it's not as beautiful a place as the parks you know. It has an old swing that I used to adore." Mary, full of energy, ran to her father, who was talking to Luke's mother on the terrace. "Dad, can we go to the park that Luke used to visit? He said he has an incredible swing there." John, always willing to participate in Mary's plans, smiled when he saw his daughter's enthusiasm. "Sure, Mary, let's go see that special park that Luke likes so much." They got ready quickly, and soon they were in the car, heading to the old neighborhood of Luke. The road was familiar to the boy, but to Kennedy and Mary, it was a new experience. The streets were simple, the houses modest, and the contrast with the life they had previously was evident when they arrived at the park. Luke smiled to see that the place had not changed much, had changed a lot. The big trees still provided shade, and the swing he liked so much was there, although a little rusty over time. The park was small, but for Luke it was always a Refuge, this is the swing, Mary said, Luke pointing to the toy. I used to spend hours here, just swinging and looking at the sky. It was my favorite place to think. Mary ran to the swing and sat down, pushing slightly forward and back. It's amazing, Luke. I've never had a swing like this. There are those expensive swings at home, but this one seems to have something special. John, who was watching from afar, smiled when he saw the two of them having fun. He walked towards Luke, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. Thank you for bringing us here, Luke. It's good to see that simple places can have so much meaning. Luke looked at Kennedy and smiled. Thank you, sir. This place reminds me of who I am and where I come from, and as much as my life is changing, it is good to know that I still have a connection with that past. Kennedy agreed, understanding perfectly what Luke meant. Never forget where you come from, Luke. That will guide you no matter how far you go. As they talked, Mary called her father. Dad pushed me on the swing, and Mary's laughter filled the with contagious joy. Luke, watching the scene, felt part of something bigger than himself. He did not know how fate had led him to meet Mr. Kennedy and Mary, but now with them he felt that his life was complete in a way he had never imagined. After a while in the park, they decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Luke showed them the places he used to go to, the streets he walked, the small shops where he bought the few foods he could. For Kennedy, that walk was a lesson in humility. He saw how Luke's life was full of challenges, but also of resilience. Each corner, each story that Luke told was a testimony of his strength and determination. When they finally returned home, the sun was already setting, dyeing the sky with orange and pink tones. Mary was exhausted but happy. Best days, Dad. Thank you for coming with us. Kennedy smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. The pleasure was all mine, Mary. Every day we spend together is special. Luke, next to him, also felt a deep gratitude. I never thought my life would change so much. And it's not just for the material things. For you, Luke's mother, who had been at home resting, welcomed them with a smile. When she saw them enter, she noticed the happiness on her son's face, and on Kennedy's and Mary's. It seems it was a day full of adventures. Yes, Mom said, Luke, hugging her, and it was wonderful that night. While everyone was prepared to sleep, Kennedy reflected on the day. He realized that sometimes the greatest lessons came from the simplest places. Being in that park, listening to Luke's stories, and seeing Mary's happiness made him understand that life was made up of small moments of genuine connections, and he was determined to keep that in his life from now on. Before going to bed, Kennedy looked out the window of his room, looking at the starry sky. He knew that there was still a lot to do, both in his personal life and in business, but now he was equipped with something he didn't have before: a deep understanding of what really mattered, and that understanding would guide him no matter what the future brought. With that thought in mind, he closed his eyes, anxious to see what the next day would bring for him, for Mary, for Luke, and for all those who now considered part of his family. In the days that followed, the life of Luke, his mother, and John, and Mary's visits to Luke's house became a natural part of their lives. The little house, which was once marked by the silence of daily struggle, was now full of laughter, conversations, and moments of true companionship. One Saturday morning, Mr. Kennedy had an idea. He was in his kitchen having coffee when Mary came in with her usual enthusiasm. Dad, what are we going to do today? Can we go to the park again? Kennedy smiled, but he had something different in mind today. I thought of something special, Mary. I want to invite Luke and his mother to spend more time together. Mary loved the idea. Yes, we can show them the garden, play with the dogs, and even have a picnic. Kennedy, excited about the idea, took the phone and called Luke's house. What do you think of you and your mother coming to spend the day here at home, Mary? And I would like to spend more time with you. Luke was surprised, but he was very happy with the invitation. He looked at his mother, who was preparing breakfast, and smiled. The Lord invited us to spend the day at his house. What do you think, Mom? She smiled back, happy with the invitation. Sure, Luke, it would be a great idea. Let's accept it. Shortly after, Kennedy and Mary came to look for them. When they arrived at the mansion, Luke and his mother were warmly received by Mary, who was full of plans for this day. I'm going to show you the garden, and then we can play with the dogs. They followed Mary through the huge garden of the mansion, which was full of flowers, trees, and stone paths. For Luke, all that was like a new world. He had never seen something so beautiful and so well taken care of. As they walked, Mary explained every detail with enthusiasm. These flowers here are my mother's favorites. Dad tells me to take care of them all the time. John accompanied the group, closely watching with satisfaction how everyone seemed to be comfortable for him. That was the real purpose of the life he had built: share special moments with important people. After exploring the garden, Mary took them to the place where the dogs played. These are Max and Luna. They love to run and look for balls. Do you want to play with them? Luke, who had always loved animals, did not hesitate. Soon he and Mary were throwing balls at the dogs, who were running happily through the grass. Luke's mother watched from afar, smiling at her son, so happy and integrated into that new environment. After a while, John suggested they have a picnic. They prepared everything together: spreading a large blanket in the middle of the garden full of simple but delicious meals. Sitting there under the soft morning sun, they talked about life dreams and the future at a pause while everyone was savoring the food. John looked at Luke and asked, "So Luke, have you thought about what you want to do when you finish school? I know there's still some time, but it's good to have some dreams." Luke thought for a moment, looking at the horizon. "I have thought about many things, sir. I want to help people, maybe like you do, but I also like to learn. Maybe I could be a teacher or a doctor. Someone who can change the lives of other people like mine," Kennedy said, satisfied with the answer. "You can be whatever you want, Luke, and with your determination, I know you will achieve any goal you set for yourself." Mary, always full of energy, joined the conversation. "And I want to be an artist, Dad. I'm going to paint beautiful paintings like the ones we have at home." Kennedy laughed, bringing Mary closer to him. "I'm sure you'll be a great artist, my daughter." The afternoon continued with more games and laughter. At the end of the day, when the sun began to set, dyeing the sky with golden tones, they met once again on the terrace of the mansion, enjoy in the pleasant weather. Luke's mother, who was sitting next to Kennedy, "This day was unforgettable for us. I never imagined that we could live something like this. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Kennedy looked at you with affection. "The pleasure was all mine. It is important for me that you sit at home here because you are part of our life now." A wave of gratitude. He knew that his life had changed in ways that he could never have foreseen, and all thanks to that unlikely meeting. "Mr. Kennedy, Mary, thank you for everything. You have no idea how much this means to us." Mary accompanied Luke and his mother to the car. "I hope we can do this more often," said Kennedy. "Our house is always open to you." That evening, when Luke returned home, he and his mother shared a conversation about the events of the day. For him, their words carried a reassurance that they would stand by his side at every turn. More than anything, Luke understood that this new family they had created together was the most precious gift life had given him. Meanwhile, John, lying in bed that night, found himself reflecting on the transformations in his life. Since the day Luke entered it, he had rediscovered the beauty in life's small, all moments, the deep value of human connections, and the significance of truly being there for the people he cherished. It was this, not his financial achievements, that filled him with a profound sense of contentment. With these thoughts in his mind, he drifted into sleep, confident that the future held even more unforgettable moments built upon the foundation of love, commitment, and above all, devotion. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Luke's touching story. Through difficult and challenging moments, we are reminded that the true value in life is not in material things but in the love, connection, and sincere relationships we build. Hopefully this story has brought you not only emotions but also deep reflections on the meaning of family and sharing. If you love this story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.